I would like to, so as not to surprise you, I want to pray for the country of Egypt this morning, because Egypt is still very much has still been a house of bondage for its own people, and 40% of the people of Egypt live on less than $2 a day. And you have seen what is going on there. Last time we talked about Tunisia. This is clearly something that has been contagious, that the logic of the open society has asserted itself. I think I have mentioned to you the books by Karl Popper, The Open Society and Its Enemies. And the way he argues for the way an open society works will sometimes do what we are seeing in Tunisia and Egypt, because the way people are finding expression, the way they are able to express themselves through internet, Twitter, and so on, is opening the society in ways that the rulers cannot. They don't know how to stop it. So let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for this opportunity to come apart and study the Bible, study the book of Revelation, surely the greatest liberation project ever undertaken. And we thank you that you have intervened in our history, and that you are determined to defeat the forces of evil. And then we pause to remember the people of Egypt. You know that they are that they have suffered, and you know Egypt well in your history. And we pray that the outcome will be good for the people of Egypt, that they will have dignity and freedom, and that there will not be violence. We ask in your name. Amen. Yes, it moved me yesterday when I heard that the army had been deployed in the streets of Cairo, but the army did not fire on the people. When they did not, they could use overwhelming force, which of course could be quite devastating in a city like Cairo, with such a population, 16 to 18 million people in that city, and then to start firing with tanks and stuff like that. You can just imagine what that could lead to. So that's something to watch out for. I have a wonderful memory from Egypt, traveling there with my oldest daughter once, and I just hoping that it will come out right. First announcement. Richard Bauckham is going to be, I have mentioned Richard Bauckham many times now in this class, and some of you have read, I think Ed, you have read his book, The Climax of Prophecy. Yeah. Yes, and Brad, you have read the theology of the book of Revelation. Did you read the other one too? Richard Bauckham is a world renowned scholar, theologian, and New Testament scholar with a very varied background. And he has published many books. He was one of my advisors at the University of St. Andrews. He has been on the doctrinal committee board for the Anglican Church, and is probably one of the people who helped the Anglican Church change their statement on the idea of eternal punishment, or at least they have changed that somewhat. And he's written many books. He's written 2 books on Revelation and a number of articles. And he will be here on Tuesday, February 8th at noon. There will be a question and answer session with the book of Revelation as the topic, and Brad Cole will be the moderator. He will be the one asking the questions. And there are quite a few medical students attending those sessions that Brad has been having now. For how long have you been doing this? 5 years? Yeah, Brad and Dorothy have been leading out in that. And which book are you in these days? You just finished Amos. Well, Amos is a good book to read when there is upheaval in Egypt. So that will be interesting to see. I think Brad has shown me the questions he's planning to ask, and I think that could be quite an interesting session. We know that you are busy and that the noon hour might not work, but people are welcome to attend. Is that okay? And then Tuesday at 5:30 p.m., all of the meetings will be in the Alumni Hall. We thought that the evening sessions would be in the Centennial Complex, but it looks like we will do everything in the Alumni Hall, in the what I used to think about as the pathology building, but I'm not sure if that works anymore. Anyway, in the evening at 5:30, there will be 2 lectures. There will be a break in between those lectures with a light meal. We will serve some food then. And his topic then will be individualism and community in the Gospel of John. He has written 2, maybe 3 books, 2 books specifically on the Gospel of John. One of them is called the Gospel as Eyewitness Testimony, and the other one is on the, I can't remember the title. I will send you an email, all of you who are on my mailing list. I will send you an email on these things. We would, of course, be happy if the community is able to show up and attend these lectures, because it is always a risk to do something like this here, where a person like Bochum, who is so well known in other communities, isn't well known in Loma Linda. But 2 lectures on the Gospel of John on Tuesday, and then 2 lectures on the Bible and ecology on Wednesday. And these sessions will be separate, so we will introduce, we're not sort of linking them. We're saying that he is giving two different sets of lectures in the evenings. His most recent book is called The Bible and Ecology, published in 2010. And I have just looked at it, and it looks like everything he does. If you look at his books on Amazon.com, which admittedly is not, a scientific marketing, but they are all 5 stars. The reader responses there are very good. We certainly do our best to make sure that we have good attendance there. So that will be quite special to have him here. He's an extremely what should I say, unassuming person. But don't let that fool you, because he's an extremely disciplined person in the topics he has taken on. This is a cartoon from the most recent issue of Financial Times, and I just thought that it might be relevant to show it to you. This you see the new reality there. You see what is going on there with the freedom movement that is now seeming to sweep through much of, or some parts of the Middle East. And then on the top of the mountain there is a World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland. They have it every year. It is extremely expensive to attend. You have to be a very, very wealthy person to attend, or have government or corporate sponsorship even to be there. Now tell me what that cartoon is trying to say. Yes, Davos is a winter sport resort. I have been there. I have ridden my bicycle through Davos a number of times, and I have skied there too. Not downhill skied. I have cross-country skied in Davos. It's high altitude, so you get out of breath, but it's a beautiful place. I have speed skated too there. They have a famous skating rink there too. But I have never stayed in a hotel, because that is too expensive. It's a very expensive place. What's the cartoon saying? With the World Economic Forum meeting on a mountain above the clouds, that there is a detached, there is a distance, there is no connection between the powers, the world economic powers, and the poor. That the plight of the poor is something that is not really hitting the radar of those who are in the ruling position, and we'll see how it ends. But that is in some ways also a message, a concern of the Bible, certainly in Amos, and in Revelation too, where there is an economic critique, an assertion of rights denied, you might say. So I thought this was in some ways pertinent to things we have been talking about here, that some people are not that interested in liberty because they are living on the right side of the clouds, as it were. Let's start reading the first 3 verses, or cutting the text in the middle of verse 3. So we will read verses 1 through 3a.
Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the pit, and locked and sealed it over him, so that he would deceive the nations no more until the 1,000 years were ended.
Yeah, thank you. So just to get a few sort of position ourselves to draw some first impressions from this text. Now, any Old Testament allusions here? Now we're approaching the end of the story, and we're looking. Here is a text that we certainly have reason to discuss from various angles. But let's just do our sort of text analysis with respect to the Old Testament. The ancient serpent, and that connects you to the beginning of the biblical narrative, surely the serpent and then the ancient serpent. And so that must be the allusion he intends to give us, yes. Anything else? The bottomless pit. The bottomless pit, where would you go for that? Well, there are various images, but since this is in the sort of cosmic conflict panorama of text, the most promising text there is from Isaiah. Now there are two places to go in Isaiah for the bottomless pit. One is in Isaiah 14, where the person who falls from heaven in Isaiah 14 eventually ends up in the abyss. In the abyssos, in the bottomless pit. So the Isaiah imagery there is good. And then there is in Isaiah 24 or 25, or in the so-called apocalyptic section of Isaiah, there is also a notion of the powers or someone being locked up in the pit. So there are two Old Testament or Isaianic antecedents for the pit or the pit imagery. Anything else you want to do there with this text? How about so that he would deceive the nations no more? The verbal perspective there. We have the agent, we have the serpent, who is the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, all those aliases, to make sure we know who we're talking about. But how about the verbal element? So that he would deceive the nations no more. Where can we go to the Old Testament for that? This is said a number of times in Revelation that he deceives. But does the Old Testament talk about that? Same thing in Genesis 3. Same thing. The serpent is in Genesis 3. And when God talks to Adam and Eve after they have eaten of the tree, then Adam will say, the woman gave me, and the woman, Eve, will say, the serpent deceived me. So there are quite obvious, quite almost in your face linkages to the book of Genesis. So what are we seeing here? And that, I think, is quite a crucial thing. We're in Revelation 20 now, and the story is ending. It's the end of the story. And then here is Genesis, and you will admit that that's the beginning of the story. So what is happening here? What sort of use is that? And so yes, it isn't over, but at least there is a certain echo of Genesis in the ending of the story. What might that make you and me what use is that? What sort of use could we make of that? When you come to the ending of a book, what should the ending of a book do? Well, what do endings of books usually do? Like that. What are endings of books good for anyway? I mean, most books, any book. Most books, the ending of the book has a sort of, you come home, you solve the plot. You have the beginning, you have a middle, you have an ending. Do you have that in the Bible? sort of in a sort of broad narratival sense, you have a beginning of the story. That's it. That's your beginning. You have a middle. What was the middle, by the way? That's the Jesus story. That is where the plot sort of, there is a kind of the maybe most exciting part of the story. So there is a middle here. And does the middle of the story, does the Jesus story here in the middle, does that have any relationship to the beginning of the story? Quite a bit. And then there is the ending of the story. But here is what I should have put that statement into your handout, that sometimes the plot can be quite confusing. Sometimes you don't really know where you are until you get to the ending. In the end of the book, things sort themselves out, and confusion may have reigned, as you were reading the book, but then in the ending of the book, things come together. So you might have been thoroughly confused all along, but when you come to the ending, then you see it. Well, of course, the ending might also take you by such surprise that you have to say, I have no idea why it is ending like this, because we did not come to the ending armed. We were not sort of readied by our prior reading of the story to be able to digest the ending. And what do you do then? You have to reread it again. You have to go back and do, a plot construct and see what was it we missed, since the plot construct we had did not get us ready for the ending. That the ending doesn't fit the story that we had sort of developed in our minds. I will bring you that. I think I might have shown you that statement before, but when I wrote my thesis at the University of St. Andrews with Richard Bauckham as one of my advisors, I had a hard time launching the idea of doing a cosmic conflict reading of Revelation, because there is such a strong Roman imperial grounding in the academic community. So I was struggling very much to find a way to set up my project. And what I did, I started from the end. My first chapter on text, I have a conceptual chapter, then I have a chapter on method, as one must, and then I started not in chapter 1, but I started in chapter 20. And I started with the ending, just to empower the storyline that I wanted to show was there. And then I found a statement by David Steinmetz. And David Steinmetz is a very learned Reformation scholar, church historian, teaching at Duke. And he has written something on how to read narratives. And Steinmetz says that sometimes everything is confusing, but until you come to the ending. So the wisest thing you can do sometimes is to cheat and read the ending first. You read the ending first. You read the book backwards. That's what he says to do. Well, I had started doing that before I saw that statement, but I was really happy because he is a very influential scholar, and who can deny me doing something like that when a big name scholar has said that's how you do it. So anyway, we haven't done that. We haven't cheated, but we have warned each other that we needed to be rereaders, of course, which makes that risk much less. So my headline for this text is Action at Last. Action at Last. So here is what I would wonder for you. You mustn't look at your handouts here and get it from me. The picture here is Albrecht Dürer. Albrecht Dürer, this is 500 years ago, living about the time of the Reformation. I actually think this is a little pre-Reformation. I'm not 100% sure about the date. But who is this figure here? So can you see who is who in this illustration? See the angel? And the angel has what? Has a key. See the key there? And here is the dragon. So, and there is the bottomless pit. So here is the angel with the key and the chain and the bottomless pit. And finally, God is taking action and doing something. Isn't that wonderful? That's what the book of Revelation is showing here. And it has switched now from the passive voice to the active voice. Did you see that? There is a switch from the passive to the active voice. He seized. He bound. He threw. He locked. He sealed. Didn't see the verbs here? These are strong verbs. So what did he do? You read them out to me and I will put them on the board. He seized. Was that the first one? He seized. These are just the verbs. And then he did what? Then he bound and threw and locked and sealed. All in the active voice, which is uncharacteristic of the book of Revelation, which seems to prefer the passive voice. The passive voice does what? It anonymizes the acting subject. So here there is no doubt. There is action. Now, are these sort of good action verbs? They're quite good action verbs, aren't they? Now here's somebody who was when you write, somebody has said about writing, good writing, that you need good verbs, strong verbs. So you have to look at our sentences and see, are the sentences, do they have sort of limp, flaccid, sort of trivial verbs in them, or could you energize the sentence just a little bit more by finding a stronger verb, a better verb? Sentences with is, he is, that is not a good sentence. You have to have a verb that is up to something, And on writing too, it has been said that the adjective is the mortal enemy of the noun. Have you heard that before? So what is wrong if you need an adjective?
Verb's not strong enough.
Well, or the noun isn't strong enough. Either way, if you need to, but it could be the verb that isn't strong enough, it could be the noun that is also not strong enough. Well, you can hardly fault John on any of these points here. He has not been, he has very good verbs here. So you have a strong action, the picture of strong action here. And now your questions. So there is action here. Now to our questions. Now, many of you are veteran Bible readers, and that is to your disadvantage here. Because if you hadn't been a veteran Bible reader, you would have known exactly which question to ask. That is exactly the question that we need to ask, that question at least. Now, if forceful action is now taken at last, why was it not done sooner? That is certainly a question that people have been asking, and people who do not see any reason not to ask, whatever question comes to mind would not be scared to raise that question. The connection with John, by the way, I think is quite helpful, because there is a throwing out, there is a sort of curtailment of the opposing power in the Gospel of John too, isn't there? An end actually to it, because now the ruler of this world in the Gospel of John is who? It would be Satan there too. And now he will be thrown out. So there is even though that is in a passive voice, it clearly indicates that the acting subject, if we were to revert it into the active voice, who will throw him out? Who is going to throw out the ruler of this world in John 12? Jesus will throw him out. I will throw him out. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be thrown out. Now I will throw out the ruler of this world. And then he switches to the active voice, or he switches at least to focus on himself. And if I am lifted up, I will draw all men to myself. So what you're doing there, what we're seeing there, is obviously something very monumental. A monumental event described in language where there is, in figurative language. So here again then, we could have a very monumental event, that the text, that our author, he energizes his verbs to make sure you and me understand that it is a monumental event. But it is figurative language. It's figurative language. Like David Barr, who is a Revelation scholar, he has said, Revelation doesn't mean what it says. Revelation means what it means, which of course sounds a bit nihilistic, but there is clearly something that needs to be interpreted between the words that are used and the reality that is in those verbs. Yes. Yes, why didn't he just kill him? Exactly. And your question? Well, that's exactly what I thought. That would be a legitimate argument to make to those who think that the Roman Empire is the sort of the grounding of the storyline in Revelation. Now, the two figures that are supposed to be the Roman Empire figures in the story are the beast from the earth and the beast from the sea. And those two, they were disposed of in Revelation 19. Hoi duo, those two, they were thrown into the lake of fire. Now there is just, this figure left. So if this is what you find at the ending of the story, then this character has been a significant character in the beginning of the story. It might in fact be a story that is significantly about him. So that point I think you could make there, and I tried to make that in sort of my argument for downgrading the status of the Roman imperial interpretation. Here is one answer. Why wasn't action taken earlier? I think that is a very legitimate question, of course, if there is intervention. So you would have to say that maybe this is a kind of intervention that isn't exactly what we thought, what the words on the surface led us to think. It might have been something else, or you could be, somewhat sort of fatalistic and say it's better late than never. But that wouldn't necessarily be all that reassuring, because if forceful action is in view, why is it better to do it now than at some earlier point when you might in fact have been able to put the evil one in his place? Well, let's read some more. Let's read the rest of chapter 20, verse 23b.
After that, he must be let out for a little while.
Why will he be released? Indeed, why must he be released? Because this is one of the key words in the storyline in Revelation. The word in Greek is a very little word. It has, the word, this is just in English, it would be like this, the word dei, which is a word, it's an impersonal verb, but it denotes necessity, And the story in Revelation is like this, that it begins by John getting a message of what must take place. Dei, the word is dei there, it's used. And that's in the prologue. Then there is in the epilogue, in Revelation 22:6, that there is a sort of closing of the story, that it must take place. He has shown you what must take place. And then there is in a transition point in Revelation 4, verse 1, that's when you go from earth to heaven, and a door was opened in heaven. And then again, I will show you what must take place. So there is the notion of necessity in this story. And now that word that sort of denotes necessity is here, you put to use for such an action like this. He must be released. So we have ingredients, we have a sort of explanatory. There is a kind of a rationale, an implied rationale here, even though that rationale is not explicit, it is implicit that there was some kind of necessity to it. Well, I know there is much more we could say here, but most people would say that to release Satan here does not make sense, that there should not be any reason to release him. And try that kind of idea for contemporary notions of justice and jurisprudence, to release your chief villain, because that's what he is. And this person, the prospect, I mean, what do you do? What sort of penal options do you have in your system? We have capital punishment. We have, life without parole and stuff like that. So what would you choose here? Somebody paid his bail. Well, he would be locked up without bail. I don't think he would get bail. I just wanted to say in response to the previous comment that the answer of this, the notion of the second chance is a notion that the early church apologist Origen, who we will talk about a little later. I want to return to him. I don't know if I mentioned him before, but he was a person who had quite a good grasp of the cosmic conflict perspective in early Christianity. And he would have liked your argument, because he would have, Origen was toying with the idea, seriously engaging the possibility, cannot God also save Satan? Can he not also do that the restoration that God has in view is a restoration that it involves everybody? He probably, there is ambiguity on what his answer was, but he did engage that question. Let's see what others have said here. Yes, we have several options in play here. Now, here is what I am suggesting to do. We'll consult the experts. we will ask for advice. That's one of the most important things one can do in medicine, by the way. And to the extent that I have had any success in my career as a physician, it has been mostly because I had a very low threshold for asking somebody when I wasn't sure. That you just have to ask somebody who knows better, and if you're not sure, you have to make sure you get sure before you do anything, because you could really be sorry. So let's ask the experts and see what they say. Here is Austin Farrer, who is a great revelation scholar, wrote a wonderful book called The Rebirth of Images that in some ways was instrumental in reviving interest in apocalyptic literature in books like the Book of Revelation in the 1960s. He's from the UK, very eloquent writer. But why is Satan merely bound, and why is he ever to be loosed again? Here is someone a little later than Austin Farrer, also from the UK, Caird. I have referred to him before. Why, once Satan had been securely sealed in the abyss, must he be let loose to wreak further havoc? And what claim does he have on God, that God is bound to give the devil his due? As though there is a sort of due process rationale behind this confinement and release of Satan. Still, here is J.P.M. Sweet, who is also from the UK, and I'm proud to have met him once. I'm not sure he's alive anymore, because he was quite old when I saw him, but he seemed just like his name, very sweet. But why, theologically, must he be loosed to deceive the nations? Why did he have to come down to earth with great wrath? Again, why does the villain why do we let him loose on earth? Why could he not have been liquidated from the beginning? Again, especially now that there is action taken. And here is a narrative commentator in the US. Why not simply destroy Satan at the beginning of the 1,000-year period? Why is it important that Satan is not destroyed during the millennial period? Well, good, nice. Experts, these are the questions they are asking. So far, these experts are not completely up there on the mountain in Davos with no connection to what the rest of us are doing down here on the ground. The sort of questions we are asking. The question occurs to every reader of this text. Once Satan is bound and the earth enjoys a millennium of undemonized celebration, why must he be released again? Well, this is a millennialist talking here, and he is sort of accessing one view of the millennium that millennium is 1,000 years of a happy time where there is undemonized celebration, and then after the 1,000 years, you know, it breaks loose again. Not everyone would agree with that, but that's one view. And here is a very succinct question: what's the point? You know, what's the point indeed? What is it? That, of course, is quite a radical thought, and quite an unusual thought in the usual sort of theological framework, the notion that God has something he needs to explain, that God, as you are saying, God is on trial, and that is another thing we would have to put there in our list of options to see if that would make sense. There is, of course, in the Genesis story here, a kind of implicit and almost explicit proof to the effect of what you're saying, because there is a question raised about God's, you know, ways of doing things. Has God really said that you cannot eat of any tree in the garden? So there is a question raised there. So, you know, maybe that could help us. Now here is what the experts are saying for answers. R.H. Charles says something is wrong with the text here. Here is what he says is wrong with the text. John died when he had completed 20 verse 3. And the materials for its completion, which were for the most part ready in a series of independent documents, were put together by a faithful but an intelligent disciple in the order which he thought right. Now, you have to give him credit for audacity, don't you? But he is one of the greatest Revelation scholars ever. He's a great scholar of Revelation, apocalyptic literature. It's still one of his commentary on Revelation is one of the commentaries on Revelation. It has survived as an important commentary for 100 years. This is not a joke, you know. But he is saying that there is something wrong with the text here. It just doesn't make sense. That John died and left it for a student. He wasn't the best student. He had a GPA below 3, and he didn't do it right. He just, you know, messed it up here. Here is another answer. Something is wrong with the author. This is the German answer, by the way. So, because nations tend to develop traditions of how they interpret things. And here is first Ernst Lohmeyer, and then there is Helmut Kraft, saying that after the capture of the beast, the seer has lost interest in the story. He's tired now. Our writer is tired, and it's sort of getting messy, and he's not interested in the story. Something is wrong with the source. This is another one. This is William Barclay, who many of you have read things by. Here is our key. The origin of this doctrine is not specifically Christian, but is to be found in certain Jewish beliefs about the Messianic age, which were common in the time after 100 BC. Meaning, you don't need to don't get too eager to understand this, because it isn't really, it is sort of, it's not an important element in the Christian narrative. And then another one closely related, something is wrong with the script. John found this event prophesied in Ezekiel 38 to 39, and prophecies must have their fulfillment. No questions asked. There is a sort of script here, and that script doesn't really make sense, but fulfilled it must be. And our time is up, so we'll have to resume. So our next session then will be, and I think it was right to do what we did today. Our next session will be February 12th. I will be going to Andrews University, which is a sister institution, this coming week, where I have been invited to give 2 presentations, one very short that I have called Dostoevsky, Ellen G. White, and the Case for Returning the Ticket. That's my first presentation, and some of my students from God and Human Suffering will know what it means, the case for returning the ticket. And then in the evening I will be reading a paper that I have to prepare, sort of like a scholarly paper, and my paper is going to be on the cosmic conflict in Revelation. And I might send it out and share it with you as I get closer to it. But we'll see how that goes, and I won't be here then next week, but we'll pick up again, and I hope that we will also see some of you at least when Richard Bauckham comes the week following this one. Thank you.